Good evening all you geeks and ghouls, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is one that you guys have been asking to see for quite a little while now, and I'm super excited to get into it, as today we're taking a deep dive into Crystal Lake and checking out every single Friday the 13th figure released by NECA in the entire company's history. And I'll be ranking the ones that I own in my personal horror collection from worst to best along the way. So far on the channel, I've done this for both the Boogeyman Michael Myers and the Man of Our Dreams Freddy Krueger, and you guys really liked those videos and wanted more. So today we're going to give the same treatment to the king of slasher movies, Jason Voorhees. And just like in the previous video, I won't be mentioning any head knockers, body knockers, miscellaneous bits of merchandise or hockey mask replicas, only figure releases of the man behind the mask. But before we begin, I just want to wish you all a very happy new year, and I hope that your 2025 has got off to a very good start. If you're new here to the channel and you love all things horror, please consider slashing that subscribe button, and don't forget to leave a like on today's video. And this may be another very extensive video, as we're covering over 20 years of horror figure history. And just like Freddy, over the years NECA have made an absolute plethora of Jason Voorhees action figures, especially Ultimates. So with that said, let's kick off the new year with a bang. Grab your machetes and hockey masks, grab a drink and a snack, and let's jump in to these killer collectibles. So we're going to start things off with the Series 1 and Series 2 Friday the 13th figure line, which consisted of 4 figures depicting Jason as he appeared in Friday the 13th Part 3 and Part 4, the final chapter. This figure line released in 2012, and as you NECA fans will notice from the packaging design, these guys are very similar to the Nightmare figure line, which began in 2011. However, we received 4 series of Freddy figures and at least 10 releases in total, whereas Jason only got 2 series with 4 figures. Series 1 included a standard and battle damage version of Jason based on his appearance in Part 3, the film where he first dons the iconic hockey mask, and the standard figure includes a spear gun, which horror fans may remember as the weapon Jason uses the first time we see him with said hockey mask, and he also comes with his trusty machete. The battle damage variant swaps out the spear gun for a bloodied axe, and the Jason head sculpt and mask have the axe wound he receives from the film's finale. The machete also features a bloodied up paint job. And as for the Series 2 final chapter figures, I only have the battle damage one in my collection, and I've been missing the standard variant since 2012, but we'll get to that later on. The Ted White incarnation of Jason comes once again with the axe wound, a bloodied axe, and machete, and also features much more weathering details on Jason's clothes. And it's worth noting that I absolutely love these figures, and the only reason they're coming so low on the list is because NECA's Friday the 13th output is just that good. I seriously don't own a single Jason Voorhees figure in the collection that I would consider being even close to a bad release. And these guys got remade as Ultimate variants years later, which are objectively much better. And speaking of Ultimates, next up we have 2 Ultimate figures based on Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, which a lot of fans call the dark horse of the franchise, but honestly I think this film is great, and it's far from the worst Friday the 13th film in the entire franchise. The fact alone that all of the events of the movie happen because 2 guys have a ridiculously heated confrontation over a chocolate bar is hilarious to me. And honestly, it doesn't bother me as much as others that Jason isn't the killer in this film. In fact, Jason's not even in the movie. Well, kind of. And that brings me to the Ultimate Dream Sequence Jason figure based on Tommy's nightmare in the film. And to say this is based on a very short scene from the movie, NECA went all out for this release, as Jason not only comes with his machete, an axe, an ice pick, but also an additional bloodied split open hand and a total of 4 unique head sculpts, one of which features worms crawling out of Jason's mask, which is pretty gnarly, 2 standard head sculpts, one that looks damp and weathered and one that's more bloodied, and finally a head sculpt with a mask based on the original one-sheet poster art for the film. So that's something that doesn't even feature in the movie itself. I mean, talk about NECA getting an A for effort with this one. He also comes with a full tombstone display piece to top it all off. NECA did a fantastic job of producing a figure that could have been a very lackluster release and making it awesome. By swapping out the hand for the battle damage one and also adding the bloodied hockey mask, you essentially have a Part 4 finale figure here, as well as that dream sequence Jason. So this is essentially a 2-in-1. So that brings us to the second Part 5 release, the Ultimate New Beginning 𝙁𝙁𝙎𝙎𝙎 figure. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that the Friday the 13th figures are some of the company's very best work. We're still near the start of this video and ranking these figures, and we've already hit what I would consider to be an absolutely exceptional release. 𝙁 the Imposter comes with an absolute plethora of accessories, which you'll soon see as the norm for the Ultimate Jasons. Included with this figure, we receive a spike, a cleaver, a flare, a knife, hedge trimmers, a machete, a spear, and a garrote, which is a word that I just learned today. It's times like this I'm glad I'm an inbox collector, especially when it comes to these Jason figures, as I would have no idea which accessory I display him with, and there's so many great choices. 𝙁 himself looks fantastic, and his famous blue chevron mask is removable to see his head sculpts underneath. And coming in next, we've got two nearly identical action figures based on Jason Voorhees' appearance in the 1989 infamous 𝙆𝙊𝙎𝙑 video game made for the Nintendo Entertainment System. As you'll know if you saw my video on every single NECA Freddy Krueger figure, or if you're a NECA collector yourself, the company gave the Springwood Slasher the same retro treatment in both action figure and retro cloth forms, which we'll come to in just a second. But I've got to say that I much prefer the NES look on Jason. I'm sure that a lot of people would have ranked these figures at the bottom of the list, but honestly I think the whole purple and blue colour scheme thing is just absolutely iconic. Anyway, the first figure we have was actually a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive that came out in 2013, and Jason is essentially a repaint of the Part 3 action figure. However, his mask, hands and feet all glow in the dark, as does the machete and axe that he comes with. The other retro Jason was released a few years later and is essentially the same figure, besides he doesn't glow in the dark. However, he does come with a floating disembodied Mrs. Voorhees head on a stand that was actually a boss battle in the video game, and also the box plays the NES game soundtrack when you open it up. Well, it's supposed to. I swear I got this thing brand new when it first came out, and that music must have played for about a week before the battery died, but it's a really cool addition nonetheless. Another reason why I really love these releases is because of that packaging design, which replicates the original NES game box art. I'm an absolute sucker for this kind of thing, and they've even featured the absolutely brutal game over screen on the inner flap. That is awesome. So to complete the trilogy of NES Jason figures, we have the retro cloth figure, and this, along with the retro NES Freddy, was originally a Toys R Us exclusive in the United States before getting a wider release. This figure is essentially a repaint of the retro Part 3 Jason, which we'll also come to shortly, and it even includes the same accessories: a spear gun, an axe, and machete. Much like the San Diego Comic-Con figure, Jason's mask also glows in the dark, and when my collection room is completely pitch black with the lights turned off, the mask is the only thing you can actually see in the room. I put this figure higher than the others simply because I'm a big fan of the retro cloth line, and I really feel like it goes hand in hand with the retro video game look. The illustration on the packaging by Christopher Ott is also exceptional. The next retro cloth figure is one that I remember being very difficult to get hold of for some reason back in the day, and it's the retro cloth 𝙁 from Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. The only reason this guy is next on the list is because I simply prefer the other Jason figures in this line to this one, but again, this is a fantastic figure. Something I really like about this one in particular is the detailed weathered paintwork on the hockey mask and the dirt all over the coveralls. In terms of accessories, 𝙁 comes with a knife, a cleaver, and a pair of hedge trimmers, which is a really nice change from the run-of-the-mill machete. All of these accessories come nice and bloodied, so it's safe to say that this figure features great paint detailing all across the board. The artwork by John Wardell is also stunning. And next up we have the retro Sackhead Jason as he appears in Friday the 13th Part 2, the first movie to feature Jason as the primary villain of the franchise, marking the start of his legendary kill count. First thing I've got to say about this guy is that I love the tailoring of the figure. I think the dungarees and tailored shirt look absolutely perfect, as does the sack that goes over Jason's head, which can be removed to reveal a face only a mother could truly love. Jason comes armed with a pitchfork, a pickaxe, and his machete. Also, the artwork featured on the packaging is done by the best to ever do it, Jason Edmiston. And now we've got the first retro cloth Friday the 13th figure that NECA ever produced, and it's Jason Voorhees based on his appearance in Friday the 13th Part 3. And this is of course the quintessential look of Jason. This figure released alongside the first Nightmare on Elm Street retro, making it one of the first ever retro cloth figures produced for the line. Much like I said in my NECA Freddy figures video, I'm unsure if NECA were planning on the retro line becoming what it is today at the point in time when these guys were released. In terms of accessories, Jason comes with the Part 3 essentials: a spear gun, an axe, and his machete. The machetes that come with these figures are like the fedora for the Freddys. You can basically always expect to get one. Jason himself looks great in the retro style, with weathering and blood details on the clothing, and the packaging features some lovely artwork by John Wardell. So now we're coming back to the Ultimate Collection, starting with Ultimate Jason as seen in Friday the 13th Part 2. Opening the window flap on this release reveals yet again a ridiculous amount of content. Like I said before, NECA really don't mess around when it comes to Jason, and they go all out for these releases. Included with the figure we get a machete, a pickaxe, a pitchfork and a spear, as well as a large knife, the head of Pamela Voorhees, and an alternate head for Jason himself to switch between his appearance with and without the burlap sack. And I've got to say, he is one handsome bugger. But NECA haven't stopped there and have even included a whole campfire display piece, which reminds me once again of the old NECA Cult Classic days when figures came with small dioramas and stands. It's these extra things that go such a long way, and overall this is an absolute unreal figure release. And now we've got one of my all-time favourite incarnations of Jason Voorhees, and honestly what is up there as one of my favourite films in the entire series. Ultimate Jason as he appears in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, the movie that marks the first time Jason comes back from the dead and is a seemingly unstoppable supernatural killing machine. And to make him even cooler, Alice Cooper provides him with a kick-ass theme song. In terms of accessories, Jason comes with a knife, a machete, a fence post, and a tombstone, as seen in his resurrection scene. And like I said, this is one of my favourite incarnations of the character. I love the costume design for Jason in Part 6, with the yellow gloves and the utility belt for all of his gear. Let me know in the comments which is your favourite Jason and why. So when it comes to the next two Ultimates, I'm gonna have to rank these guys together, simply because I cannot decide what is my favourite figure between the Ultimate Part 3 Jason and the Ultimate Part 4, the final chapter Jason. I consider both of these to be the quintessential look of Jason Voorhees, and also the quintessential action figures. Starting with Part 3, Jason is well equipped for his Crystal Lake killing spree, as he comes armed with a wrench, a knife, a pitchfork, a fire poker, and the usual suspects, an axe, machete, and a spear gun. Jason also has not one but two very well painted sets of head sculpts and hockey masks. And to top things off, the packaging displays the Part 3 poster with a full 3D lenticular effect, as a nice little nod to the original gimmicky 3D release for the film. And let's not forget that Friday the 13th Part 3 has one of the most fire soundtracks of all time. And when it comes to the Ultimate Final Chapter figure, those poor camp counselors definitely don't stand a chance, as Jason comes with a machete, an axe, a bloodied cleaver, and a knife, as well as a corkscrew and a hacksaw. This figure also includes two interchangeable head sculpts and hockey masks, and the additional accessory of Pamela Voorhees' grave, which is another really nice touch. This movie is tied as my favourite entry into the entire franchise along with Jason Lives, so please tell me in the comments below what is your favourite Friday the 13th movie and why. As I said, both of these figures are, in my opinion, the essential Jason Voorhees action figures, so if you don't yet own any of the NECA Friday the 13th stuff, or you don't know where to start, I highly recommend picking both of these guys up. So the last figure that we're going to look at before I do the honourable mentions is the Ultimate Jason from Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. This was the first time that Jason was played by Kane Hodder, who is still the actor most associated with the role, having played the character in 4 movies. And when it comes to the Ultimate figure line, I'd say that this one is more than likely the best of the bunch. NECA absolutely killed it with this figure. As you can see, Jason features a crazy amount of detail to replicate his appearance in the film, and the paintwork, especially on his exposed zombified body, is phenomenal. And once again, the figure is loaded with accessories, including a machete, a knife, a tent stake, an axe, a sickle, a woodcutter, and a brush cutter, resulting in a truly definitive Jason action figure. He also has an alternate head, pair of hands, and an alternate mask to recreate his famous unmasking scene in the film's finale. Just an all-around fantastic release. Now, before I reveal the top 5 Friday the 13th action figures I own in my horror collection, we're going to take a quick look at all the remaining Friday the 13th NECA figures that the company have produced in its history that I do not own personally. And we'll start things off with the Toony Terrors Jason figures. As I've said before, I don't collect the Toony Terrors line, but I have to admit, out of all the releases from NECA that I've seen, Jason is one of the characters that fit that Scooby-Doo Hanna-Barbera cartoon style the best. NECA also planned to produce an NES Toony Terror Jason, but it was sadly sadly cancelled along with their planned NES Freddy due to licensing issues. And now we're going to go back 20 years, back to 2004, to take a look at some old school quarter scale figures. The first is this 19-inch tall figure of Jason based on his appearance in Freddy vs. Jason. And this figure looks fantastic and will probably be quite hard to come by these days. NECA also made an 18-inch Freddy Krueger figure around the same time that looks to also be based on Freddy vs. Jason, so these guys seem to go hand in hand. But a year earlier, in 2003, NECA also produced what I believe may be their very first Friday the 13th figure, with this motion activated sound figure of Jason as he appears in the New Blood. And I've got to say, out of all the Jason figures that I currently don't own in my collection, this guy's got to be near the top of that wish list. I absolutely love everything about this figure, and it's a true classic. The same figure was later made smaller and became one of the first figures released in the first series of the NECA Cult Classics line, but we'll get to that one very soon. In 2005, NECA brought us the Friday the 13th Part 2 25th anniversary box set that came with Sackhead Jason, Pamela Voorhees, a whole bunch of accessories, and this large diorama display of the altar with Mrs. Voorhees' head and sweater. This box set is very similar in design to the Night He Came Home box set and the Freddy vs. Jason box set, and is something that I've always wanted to pick up for the collection since I started collecting horror figures. But unfortunately, for one reason or another, I never managed to acquire this one for the collection, but we'll see what happens in 2025. 2006 saw Sackhead Jason get a solo release with this NECA Cult Classics Hall of Fame figure, and this included an alternate head, a machete, a pickaxe, a spear, and also a display base along with a Mrs. Voorhees head. Like a lot of the Cult Classics line, this figure has aged extraordinarily well, and despite the newer Ultimate Part 2 Jason being the superior release, both figures look to share the same head sculpt modes, especially when you compare the Sackhead Jason and Pamela Voorhees head. But if it's not broke, why fix it? And to coincide with the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, NECA produced an 18-inch Jason Voorhees figure that's certainly become quite the expensive collectible to obtain in a brand new condition. The figure looks really good and was produced in action figure scale a year later and released in the packaging similar to the Series 1 and Series 2 Jason figures that followed it. Speaking of which, there is also that Friday the 13th Series 2 final chapter figure that I never picked up to complete the set. This figure includes a machete and a knife, unlike the battle damage variant that comes with an axe. I might as well also talk about the Ultimate Remake Jason while we're at it, as I also don't own this guy in my collection either. In fact, he's the only Ultimate Jason that I'm missing. Ultimate Remake Jason comes with a machete, an axe, a fire poker, an ice axe hammer, and a screwdriver, as well as an alternate head sculpt. And one of the most recently released Jason Voorhees figures that I have yet to acquire for the collection is the quarter scale final chapter figure that, if I remember correctly, released sometime in 2018 or 2019. This is essentially a larger scale version of the previous final chapter figures, but that extra scale results in a much more detailed paint application, especially on the head sculpt. This figure comes with a machete, an axe, a knife, and an ultimate battle damage hand, and I really like the packaging design for this guy. So hopefully I will get around to picking this one up someday. And the final honourable mention is one that I also talked about in my NECA Freddy Krueger figures video, and it's the extremely limited edition 2-foot wide Freddy vs. Jason diorama statue that was produced in a quantity of only 650 back in 2004. This statue set is a larger scale resin statue version of the Freddy vs. Jason action figure box set that came out the same year. So with that, we've reached the last 5 Friday the 13th figures produced by NECA in the company's history. We've covered over 20 years of Jason Voorhees action figures, and the last top 5 are the ones that I consider to be the very best from my personal horror collection. And first up is this Ultimate Freddy vs. Jason figure. Now I know that I said the Ultimate Part 7 was the best Jason figure in the Ultimate line, and I believe that that is still true, but the reason that this guy comes into the top 5 is because I got this figure signed by the actor who donned the hockey mask for that movie, 𝙤𝙤𝙎𝙏. Despite this figure taking a top spot due to the signature, I've got to say this is still a magnificent figure release. Jason comes with a total of 3 interchangeable masks, including one that is covered in blood and another that has been marked with Freddy's blades. He also comes with a bloodied machete and a normal machete that has a fire effect piece that can clip onto it, and he also comes with a teddy bear. And until I made this video, I actually forgot that Ken signed this figure with a speech bubble reading "Freddy sucks," and that is just awesome. So taking 4th place, we've got the NECA Cult Classics Series 1 Jason Voorhees figure. This is the action figure scale variant of that original 18-inch Jason, and is one of the first figures released for the legendary Cult Classics line. What makes this particular figure so special though, is that it's signed by 𝙄𝙎𝙎𝙎𝙎 himself. But even without the autograph, I think this guy would have still made it to my own personal top 5, as not only do I think this release has aged perfectly, but I've got a lot of nostalgia for this figure. Its significance as NECA's first ever Jason figure may have also had something to do with it too. The figure comes with a machete, axe, harpoon spear, and a forest diorama display base. It's also worth noting that NECA released this guy again in a smaller cardboard backed clamshell. Overall, this is a true classic. And in 3rd place, we've got the Freddy vs Jason action figure box set. This is another release that featured in my NECA Freddy Krueger figures video, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that this one has come near the top of this list either. Still regarded as one of the best NECA box sets, and for good reason, this set includes figures of both Freddy and Jason on fiery display bases, replicating the epic showdown from the 2003 movie. Included with the set, we get a machete and 2 alternate Freddy heads, one that's the demonic version of the character, and a decapitated winking head that goes into Jason's hand. This is another collectible that I was after for a very long time, so I was ecstatic to finally be able to add this to the collection. And much like the Cult Classics figure, the Jason included in this box set also got a singular release in the cardboard backed clamshell. And taking 2nd place is the retro cloth Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Lives figure. Like I said before, this is one of my favourite incarnations of the character, and honestly, this is also one of my all-time favourite retro cloth figures in the entire line. I think NECA have done an unreal job of recreating this look of Jason in retro cloth form. The figure comes with a machete, hunting knife, and a fence post, and the accessories actually slot into their respective sheaths on Jason's utility belt. Not only do I think this is an outstanding looking figure, but the artwork by the great Jason Edmiston featured on the packaging is absolutely stunning. To top it all off, this figure is also signed by CJ Graham, who portrayed Jason in this entry of the franchise. So that brings us to the final figure of today's video. We've now looked at the entire history of NECA's Friday the 13th figures, spanning over 20 years of incredible collectibles. And now we're left with the release which I consider to be the greatest of all time. And this figure is a true holy grail piece in my horror figure collection, being one of the most sought after figures out there. And of course, it's the 2015 San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Pamela Voorhees and Young Jason retro cloth double pack. I'm sure that all of you horror collectors out there know about this release, as it has become one of the rarest and most expensive horror figures out there. This set was released in a limited quantity, and the execution of the figure pack is still really impressive and is an overall fantastic homage to the original Friday the 13th. The head sculpts on both figures are spectacular, especially the deranged Mrs. Voorhees head sculpt that has a great likeness to the late great Betsy Palmer. The pack includes a knife, an axe, and a lake moss accessory for Jason. I also really like the Camp Crystal Lake shirt that young Jason is wearing, and to top it all off, the packaging features incredible artwork by Jason Edmiston. And I was fortunate enough to get this collectible signed by both special effects legend Tom Savini, who worked on the first 4 Friday the 13th movies, and 𝙁𝙁𝙁𝙁, the actor who portrayed young Jason. And so that concludes today's video. Let me know in the comments which figures in today's video are your personal favourites and which ones you'd put at the top of the list. Also, don't forget to tell me what your favourite entry is to the Friday the 13th franchise. I really hope that all these licensing issues going on with the Friday the 13th series can be cleaned up pretty quick, so then NECA can get back to making some amazing Jason Voorhees collectibles in the future. Once again, I wish you all a happy 2025, and until next time guys, take care.